So we've heard a lot about scale over the last 2 days, a little bit this morning already and a lot yesterday. And when Dan Barber kicked the publisher meeting off and said farm to table was not sufficient, part of what he was implying was there's some scale limitations if we just cherry pick our favorite ingredients and our favorite settings to eat good food. So what will it take to get good food, get respect for farm workers and farm animals to a higher scale? And to lead that discussion, we invited Claire Cummings, who is a very unique person in her own right. She's the trash-talking, waste-fighting garbage gorilla, more formally known as the first ever waste specialist for Bon Appetit Management Company Foundation. This is the nonprofit arm of the pioneering food service provider that operates more than 500 cafes in 32 states for corporations, universities, and museums around the country. Claire has implemented for Bon Appetit a move towards using reusable to-go containers. She supported the development of kitchen waste tracking system that helped them reduce and eliminate a lot of waste, and partnered with farmers to address waste in the fields. So Claire, thank you so much for leading this discussion.
Can you guys hear me? Great. Do we want to kick this off?
Yeah, just gonna kick it off with a little activity. How's everyone doing this morning? Good? All right, cool. So first we're just gonna start with a little stretch break. Stretch it out. I know it's gonna be a long day, so a lot of talking, and we just wanna give everybody an opportunity to just go ahead, stretch. So left, so right. All right, and then we need one brave volunteer to come down to the front. Somebody who can run fast.
Get her done,
Denise,
people.
would you do it? All right. What's your name? Camille. All right, give it up for Camille, everybody. All right, so this is something that we like to do in our student movement, Food Recovery Network. So as Camille dashes this way, we're going to do a wave that follows her this way, and as she goes this way, you guys can go ahead and follow her on back. All right, so you can dash this way, mix it up, try to fool them. Yep. All right, go. Woo! Yeah, get the sound effect.
All the way.
Woo! All right, give it up for Camille again. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. Well, thank you all for having us here today. As they said, my name is Claire Cummings. I work for Bon Appetit. We are not the magazine. We are the food service provider that operates around the country at colleges, corporations, museums. We essentially come in and do the food service. And I work as the waste specialist. So as a company, we have a commitment to sustainability, and waste is a very important part of that sustainability commitment. And so as the waste specialist for Bon Appetit, I've had the pleasure of working with these two fine panelists next to me on a variety of different projects. So I'm going to start by introducing Nick Papadopoulos, who is the CDDO, Chief Dumpster Diving Officer of the Crop Mobster Community Exchange. Nick is not one to sit around. After a diverse career as serial entrepreneur, consultant, and mediator, he was asked to manage his family's Bloomfield Organics farm. During this experience, he saw firsthand the toll food waste took on his family farm, his community, and the environment. In 13 months, the Crop Mobster Community Exchange has grown into a network of over 6,000 people in the San Francisco Bay Area region. By posting and sharing instant alerts on surplus food and other topics, this community has raised awareness of the food waste issue and prevented over 600,000 pounds of food from going to waste. This translates into over 1.5, is that million? Yeah. Wow. affordable or donated servings, and $600,000 in revenue and exposure for small businesses and nonprofit hunger relievers. Crop Mobster has recently been awarded the Red Cross Hero Award for their work and has been selected as one of 100 entrepreneurs to advise the United Nations on how to accelerate progress on the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. He and his wife, Jess, in the audience today, live on the farm. So let's give Nick a round of applause for being here. Thank you. Our other panelist, who I've had the pleasure of working with for, I guess it's been over a year now. We've been working together for a while. Ben Simon is the founder and executive director of the Food Recovery Network, which unites students at American colleges to recover surplus food from their campuses and donate it to hungry Americans. Since its founding in September 2011, FRN has expanded to 89 colleges and donated over 270,000 meals. Ben was recognized by ABC's News Univision as one of their top 10 social entrepreneurs of 2012, and he is a social entrepreneur in residence at the University of Maryland College Park, where he will graduate this May. So thank you both for being here today. I think what we're going to try and do with this panel is give you that fabulous hope sandwich that you can then share, with your respective communities around the country. We're all really passionate about food waste, and it's a topic that not enough people are talking about. Everyone asks, where does my food come from? Under what conditions is it raised? But very few people are asking, what happens to food after the plate? What happens to it when it's wasted, when it's being thrown out? And all three of us are working to address that issue. So I want to start with the basics of just what the problem is and why it's a problem. So the US wastes as much as 40% of all edible food. And as was noted yesterday, I think it was a question to Mark Bittman, we also have a growing population that we have to feed. So we have this really interesting conundrum where we're throwing out a huge portion of our edible food, and yet we're worrying about how we need to feed a growing population. So Nick, I want to start with you. How is it possible that almost half of the edible food in our country never even makes it to a person's mouth? And where in the food system is waste happening, and why?
Alrighty. Thanks, Claire, and thanks to the sponsors. I'll just stand up here. Sitting is hard. Before I dive into this question, I want to thank my mom, who's probably watching this right now. Happy Mother's Day. When right before I was born, she was out sunbathing, and talk about reframing the message. It just hit me. She duct taped "Be careful" on her stomach, pulled the tape off, and that was the message she sent to the doctor right before I was born. So I want to thank her for doing that. That was pretty fun. Oh, there's also a great Mr. T video called Treat Your Mother Right. Check it out. It's awesome. YouTube, share it. When I started this project 13 months ago, I had no clue about the food waste issue. And now that we're 13 months into this effort, it's still unfathomable all the different reasons why food goes to waste. It's kind of like a 19-sided Rubik's Cube, right? And it can get very complicated. But I'm going to try to frame it for you, as I've done for myself, just to try to get our heads around this. Production, all the way to the consumption of food in the landfill or the dirt where it ends up, going across and going down. We've got geography, product type, and a word I'll finish up on, a mindset. Let's start with production. I work and help manage with my wife our family farm. Food goes to waste or is lost for a lot of reasons on the farm. Sometimes it's grown very wonky, and people just don't buy a lot of wonky food these days, has blemishes. So that's one reason, and you're all familiar with that, especially with your work at Edible. Secondly, there's a lot of parts of the food that don't get eaten. Broccoli, for example, when we harvest broccoli, we cut off the tops, and guess what happens to the stalks, which are some of the best when they're steamed up, right? Gets tilled under. So a huge amount of the plants that we're growing and other types of foods just we're not using the whole plant. And secondly, or thirdly, when you're farming and you got Mother Nature on your board of directors, it's very hard to make a perfect production plan because she shows up to meetings disgruntled, and it's just hard to be perfect. So we end up with a lot of overproduction. And we see this with beginning new farmers especially, but also even the most experienced. Really hard to do. And as you move in through the supply chain, you've got distribution. We've seen garbage cans with distributors who, they can't sell some of the food that's started to spoil or even donate it. So they're chucking it to the dump, large garbage bills each week. I've heard when you move over to retail and food service that 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 truckloads of food goes to waste. So we're starting to talk about some phenomenal numbers, and I know some of our speakers have said that's not important, but on this issue, I really do feel it's important. That number Claire mentioned, almost $200 billion, it's really almost $1 trillion when you factor in the costs of climate change and other things, and we'll get to that in a little bit with Ben here. And over to all of us, we're called consumers, but really I'd like to pull us out of that frame a little bit too. We're people that eat and have families and live in communities. We spend on average $2,000 each year on food that goes to waste. So there's a lot of reasons, also depending on where you're at in the world. Sometimes at different points in the supply chain, food is wasted. In other countries, for instance, the storage and refrigeration or distribution just isn't right there. Other places it's on the production level. And then you can go into product type, but fundamentally, stepping back from the Rubik's Cube, the number one reason why food is going to waste at such phenomenal proportion is that somehow we've developed this mindset over the last 50, 60, 70 years that it's acceptable. And food has become commodified to the point where we don't care about it as one of the most magical things in our life. And I know I'm speaking to the jazz trio here, so I'll just stop there and pass it over to Ben.
Great, yeah, and so I'd love, Ben, for you to talk a little bit, as Nick alluded to, this is a financial problem. It hurts farmers, it hurts businesses, restaurants, it hurts consumers to waste this much food. But what are some of the environmental and social implications of wasting this much food?
Thanks, Claire. Is this on? Yeah, so in terms of social implications, it's just crazy how America actually grows enough food to feed everybody, but yet, as Anna mentioned this morning, we have 47 to 50 million Americans who are food insecure and don't know where the next meal is coming from. So we talk about America not having a food shortage problem, but having a food distribution problem. What we're talking about is a food waste problem. It's just food that could be feeding people is just getting thrown away. So I think that's probably the biggest social implication of it. Is just that it's exacerbating the issue of hunger in America, and the same trend follows through all across the world. And then in terms of environmental impacts, it's really shocking, but just the amount of food that gets wasted accounts for 4% of all America's oil usage, and 25% of all freshwater usage, and 23% of all methane emissions. When food gets wasted, it often gives off a methane gas, which the EPA estimates is 21 times more harmful towards climate change than carbon dioxide. So we've just got a really big issue on our hands in terms of all of the various implications of food waste.
I'll just jump in real quick. I just want to mention, too, that because it's really important when you mention about greenhouse gas emissions, and yesterday we talked about inserting the food movement into the political realm on topics that are more maybe front and center. We learned just a few months ago that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions behind China and the United States. So talk about an opportunity to tackle over here another thorny topic that's hard to get at by focusing on one that I think we can get more people at the table to focus on, which is food.
Yeah, and if all these numbers are kind of going over your guys' head, just to sort of give a stark visual image, America wastes enough food every single day to fill the Rose Bowl football stadium, one of the largest football stadiums in the country, twice every single day with just the food that's wasted.
So this is a hope sandwich, and we're not going to end it there. So I want to talk about solutions. Nick, I'll start with you. Crop Mobster is doing some phenomenal things, not just in the Bay Area, but around the world. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are working on and how the Crop Mobster model is addressing the issue of waste?
Sure thing. We really see it as opportunity. I was standing in our vegetable cooler on our farm last March, and I'm sitting there staring at 20 boxes of premium organic produce that had come back from farmers market unsold, and finally it registered in my thick skull that, man, this is totally flippin' crazy. So we just started using this to issue urgent community alerts and telling the open story about how that was a loss for our farm and for our community in the San Francisco Bay Area region. And within minutes, a mom would text, "I'm in," and rip out to our farm in a minivan, and the next day recover some of our costs as farmers, right? Over 53% of farms in the state of California lose money, so we need help. But she was able to deliver it to 20 households who were able to get a great deal. So a win-win, and that was where Crop Mobster was born. And the way it's evolved is that we're building the gear to create community exchanges for cities, counties, or regions, and instant alert services where anytime food is at risk of going to waste or other surplus materials, folks can post creative and urgent deals, donations, freebies, gleanings, that was spoken about a little bit yesterday, I believe, trades, whatever it takes to find a home. A very open platform for basically issuing alerts on food waste and other material emergencies and then flashing it out to the community. So we start crowdsourcing it with email and social media to find a home for it and turn those emergencies into celebrations. Over 90% of everything that's been posted over the last year has found a home. And secondly, we don't stop there. These stories of impact and starting to cater the hope sandwiches out there are really important. So after these commodities find a home, and I absolutely can't stand that word, we tell impact stories that we publish every single time. It could be some goat's milk that found a home, or some lettuce, and two parties got together and a herd of people to Crop Mobster a home for it. We try to inspire the community to write thankful stories of documented and inspiring impact. Aside from the gear, we are working with communities because tech isn't going to solve the problem alone. It's mindset, behavior, and getting it done almost sometimes across groups that don't talk with each other. So we're convening mayors, farm leaders, educators, and others to act as steering committees that help localize our platform to their communities. We've just started our first pilot in the city of Elk Grove, California, where we got the food bank, the Farm Bureau, a teacher who does films with his students about these topics, and others to help drive this into their community. And I can't thank them enough for really stepping up, the city of Elk Grove and the Elk Grove Food Bank, for saying, this is new, a little bit crazy at times, but we believe in it and we need to go. So that's just a little bit, and I'll pass it over to Ben.
Yeah, great. And Ben, can you talk a little bit about the Food Recovery Network and how it's fighting waste around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so Food Recovery Network got started 3 years ago in September 2011 during my first senior year at the University of Maryland. I'm now just finishing up my third senior year. I'm going to graduate in a couple weeks. But so some friends and I were in our campus dining hall towards the end of the day and basically just witnessed good food that looked like it was right about to go to waste. And so we talked to our dining hall manager and asked, and we confirmed, and yeah, that was really good food that they were indeed right about to just throw into a trash can. And so I personally had a background in hunger and homelessness activism, and a lot of my co-founders did as well. And so we knew there was a need in our community, and we basically just found an easy way to take that food and just drive it down to local homeless shelters, soup kitchens, after-school programs, senior citizens' homes, and other nonprofits that are fighting hunger. And right off the bat, we're donating 100, 200 pounds of food every night. Corn, chicken, salad, pasta, fish, ribs, steak, pretty much anything you can imagine. Like our campus has a really nice all-you-can-eat buffet where they have a top chef that just makes amazing food. So this is really high-quality food. And we just couldn't believe it. So I called my friend who was who was an incoming freshman at Brown University. And 3 weeks later, he started the second chapter, and they had donated 500 pounds within their first 3 weeks. So that kind of validated that this is something that had the potential to scale, and it really was just a mystery that this didn't already take place, that this wasn't already in place. So we got more friends involved, created a co-founding team, called all of our friends at other colleges, and they started chapters, and from there we've just steadily grown. We got some media coverage that helped push us along that path, and now today, 3 years later, we're now at 89 colleges and growing. So we've more than quadrupled this year under the leadership of Autumn, who's actually in the audience today, coming out to support me. She's our director of expansion. Thanks a lot, Autumn, and the rest of the team. So we've really had an amazing growth rate, and we're just going to continue to grow. We're hoping to be at least 150 colleges. Next year, we've donated over 340,000 pounds of food, which amounts to over 270,000 meals to hungry Americans. And we're just announced the launch of our most ambitious program yet, which is our first adventure off the college campus. We basically noticed that the same trend was true, not just for colleges, but for grocery stores, for most restaurants, caterers. If you talk to the managers there and you ask them, are you donating food? Most of them say, really, I would like to help, but I don't want to get sued, or there might be food safety concerns. So it's just a matter of spreading the word that not only can you help the community, but you can also help the environment and help your bottom line at the same time. We routinely see people saving money. Almost everybody who starts donating food sort of sees it as an added cost, but ultimately saves a serious amount of money through an enhanced tax deduction for food recovery that is twice as much as the normal tax deduction. The government has placed an enhanced tax deduction to try to encourage it. So the program that we just announced the launch of is called Food Recovery Certified. And Food Recovery Certified is the first and only national certification program around food recovery. And as Anna was kind of talking about mirror neurons, that's sort of the basis for Food Recovery Certified, is that we're trying to normalize food recovery. We're trying to create a national brand and movement around just changing the behavior one by one of all these institutions, all of these food businesses across the country. Right now, the EPA estimates that less than 1% of all of America's food waste is recovered. 97% goes to landfills where it gives off methane. About 2% is composted. So we've got a lot of room for improvement. And the NRDC estimates that if that 1% was increased to just 15%, it would cut hunger in half. It could literally feed 25 million Americans every single year. So we're dealing with something extremely powerful. I think we're just on the cusp of it. But Food Recovery Certified, again, our goal is to just create a standard around it and just make it the norm across the country.
And we thought we'd just put you to work here. He's at a powerful moment with his initiative, and if we can take action here in this room, we could literally help launch this program right here today. You can go to the Food Recovery Certified website or go to Crop Mops, where we've launched an urgent alert on Twitter, Facebook, and on our site. And if each one of you can maybe look at it and share a personal note with your peeps, and then spread the word to any food business you know, we can literally help launch this into a national campaign. So I'd love for you to do that today. Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to follow up on that, Ben. So Bon Appetit is one of those food service providers that is capable of donating their excess food, and I've worked with our accounts to literally double our programs in the past year. So we have food recovery programs at over 70 cafes, a number of which are through the Food Recovery Network, which is very exciting. And one of the first barriers that I know that you've experienced and that we came across when we first started diving into this issue was that everyone assumes in the industry that you can't donate food. You're going to be sued, you're going to be held liable. And as you know, and we've worked together on this, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act protects donors from liability. So it's this really pervasive misinformation that's out there in our industry about the donation of excess food. So I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on your experience trying to convince, I guess, folks that liability isn't an issue. And then I'd also love to expand on the idea that beyond liability, there are some other challenges to food recovery. And I don't know if you can speak to any of those other challenges to getting programs going.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, there's a huge amount of misinformation in the industry. And kind of as I was talking about, if you approach your average restaurant or grocery store manager, they'll say, no, I'm sorry, I heard about somebody else who got sued or this or that. But actually, a recent study out of the Food Recovery Project, which is out of the University of Arkansas, hey Denise, actually recently published a report where they went back through decades of legal cases and found that there has never been a single lawsuit around food recovery. Not only that, but if there ever was a lawsuit, any of the folks donating their surplus food to someone in need in their community are covered, very, very well protected from liability. It's a universal protection, and it goes very far to protect them. So any good faith donor donating surplus food is covered by the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. I'll say it again, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, because everybody needs to know about this act, because this law protects all good faith donors from liability, but it's like a ghost. It's a myth that you're going to get sued if you start donating. And if it weren't for this, 25 million Americans would not be hungry right now. That's a really powerful thing, is that all of these restaurants have in their hands, and you guys as publishers have also this powerful opportunity to spread the word about this and to get more people to start donating. In terms of other challenges, I would say that is definitely the primary challenge. I think another big challenge that's pervasive in the world of food recovery is nailing down the transportation of the food. Often people will want to donate, and there will be a local recipient in the community that could use that food. But it's tough to sometimes nail down the logistics. Sometimes it will be, for example, I was just talking to someone at Dunkin' Donuts corporate office and finding out why more Dunkin' Donuts don't participate in food recovery, and it's because a lot of them close really late at night, and a lot of, they want to be donating the food at like 11 p.m., but a lot of local homeless shelters and stuff close at like 9. So it's just tough for them logistically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Nick can speak to the logistics challenge. I'm just going to throw out some other challenges that I've experienced implementing programs in a variety of different states around the country, and that is, as a food service provider that completely understands that liability is not an issue, and we encourage all of our programs to launch food, or all of our cafes to launch food recovery programs. I have gone into multiple states where the figuring out what is and is not permissible for donation around the food safety and around what the expectations are around how the food's donated has been incredibly complicated and very difficult to pin down who to talk to. In some states, I've talked to the State Department of Ag. Some states, I talked to the local county health officials. Food recovery, although it's not a new concept, is very much still being, it seems like, figured out from the state health departments and the Department of Ags around the country, and that's been relatively challenging from state to state issues. Maybe, Nick, can you talk about some of the logistics that
Sure thing. Logistics between the ears is really important. Having bold leaders, like we just heard with Pacific, say, look, there's a lot of maybe hurdles that we need to cross here, but let's get it done. Let's eliminate the dumpster. More and more, that's really where it starts, is with leaders of anyone in the food organization, as well as their employees, just saying, look, enough is enough. There is a solution to every single hurdle, regulatory or otherwise, that's out there. For instance, when I started this, everyone told us that distribution would be the challenge. But we found that the answers lie in the community, and everyone, over 90% of the food that's been donated or offered for a deal or for free or for trade, it's found a home through community crowdsourcing. And so a lot of the infrastructure already exists in communities, just like Lyft and Uber and others have figured out that, wow, there's a lot of open car space that can be used, to get people around. So I think I'll just chip that in. I think that's another one on distribution that we need to look at again, just through a different frame.
And with Crop Mobster, we've had the pleasure of being able to work together, and we're actually trying out the Crop Mobster model, trying to get our chefs to participate in Crop Mobster as a way to capture produce that would otherwise go to waste. And Nick, I'd love for you to talk about how you're working to scale up the model for food service providers around the country, for other larger businesses.
That's a big one. You know, we're 13 months old, and my whole philosophy to start was I just wanted to solve a problem on our farm. Then it expanded to multiple farms and food businesses in our community, and then the Bay Area, plus a pilot in a fairly good-sized city outside of Sacramento. So we're still working on the scalability issue. But I think beyond the scaling of organizations and technology and all this stuff, the mindset and the passion is totally scalable. And if we can all just get back to work, back to basics a little bit, like our forebears did, and just eliminate in our heads the acceptability that food is okay to waste and start getting back to basics in that regard, that's the most important thing to scale right now. And then what we're seeing is this flurry of innovation, especially after the UN and others started putting numbers on it, right? That's when people rush in when they think they can make a lot of money. I had no clue about any of that when we started. But the innovation, as Benno mentioned, and others, is just erupting. So what we've done is we've just launched our second generation platform. It took a lot of work. We did it on very little resources. That's the technology side. Now we can build a community exchange for any city, county, or region. But what's harder to scale is the organizational approach. You can't just group on this sort of deal, okay? What we've found, and this is our background in food policy consulting and others, is that we want to sleep on couches and we want to get out into communities and work with the mayors like Gary Davis in Elk Grove and the head of the food bank, Marie Giacchino, the Farm Bureau, and others, and we want to really work to understand those community needs and tailor what we're doing and empower them to fish, empower them to solve their own problems. That's harder to scale because it means people time and replicating more nicks and more bends. So we're working through that right now with our pilot, but we're very excited about the progress we've made. I also feel like taking a few naps here pretty soon because it's been quite a lot of work, as I know you can attest to.
So one of the things with the food waste movement that I think is important to drive home is that if anyone has seen the EPA's food recovery hierarchy, it's a really lovely triangle, a pyramid that shows the kind of the different preferences for how to handle waste. So what's most preferable to least preferable. And compost is, you know, the one thing that everyone thinks of when you're talking about doing the right thing with your waste, but according to the EPA's food recovery hierarchy, it is the second from the bottom, so it's just one above landfill. Feeding people is at second to the top, and at the very top is preventing waste from happening in the first place. And I'd love one or both of you to talk about maybe how you anticipate in the future things might change for your organizations or how you might adapt as businesses get better and more efficient at preventing waste in the first place, since it seems that you're both built around the idea that waste exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that one. So for Food Recovery Network, we routinely see a drop in the amount of food donated, which is good and bad, but we mostly see it as a good thing because it saves the business money and it's better for the environment to just not be wasting in the first place. As Claire mentioned, that's the top of the EPA food recovery hierarchy, is to just not waste in the first place. So we do see that, like for example, I mentioned how at University of Maryland, from the first diner that we were donating from, it was like 100 to 200 pounds every single night. We saw that drop from 100 to 50 down to about 25 pounds a night, just because they're becoming a lot more conscious of the food that they had been wasting, and they came up with really creative strategies to repurpose the food for the next day. Like for example, if they had leftover corn on the cob one night, they'd make cream of corn the next night or something with that leftover corn. So we see that as a good thing, and we're ready for it. We think that us getting in the door to create the food recovery program is a great way to make that change happen by helping them become more conscious of the food they're wasting.
Yeah, I'll echo what Ben just mentioned. Our job is to work ourselves out of a job. And I started this to really on the issue of a reactive approach to situations of food waste, but it's evolved to much more than that since then. We've got kids posting videos on food waste prevention. This alert today is another example of how when we're working with the community and find out about awesome programs like Ben's, we can inject these preventative recognition programs or innovations in there. Or another great one is Lean Path. They're a company that helps people track and reduce and change behavior around food waste purchases in the food services industry. I think you know a little bit more about them than I do. But let's get back to this movement thing. You mentioned the food waste movement, and a gentleman yesterday said, let's be careful about throwing that word around. I'm not sure that we quite yet have a movement around food waste. My dad was involved in the Vietnam War protests way back in the day, and as many of you know, that type of movement was the real deal. WTO, Occupy. I don't think we're quite there at a movement when people are so enraged about the problem that we've got with food waste and the opportunity to turn it into value for communities that we can call it a movement. I want to see some chairs start to fly around and people start screaming. I'm not sure if I'm going to go Howard Dean on people quite yet and bust out the screams, but we really need to think about what a movement means in this context, and I just see so much opportunity that's being left on the table still.
I will cut in there and say that I think we do have the cusp of a movement around food waste. I mean, if you would have been at our conference, I mean, we just held a conference, our first ever national conference for the movement on food waste. It was called the Food Waste and Hunger Summit. We held it at Northwestern University in Chicago just about a month ago, and there was over 250 students there getting active and getting riled up about food waste. This is one of the fastest growing student movements in America right now. This is what's popular. Food is, I'm on a college campus. Our office is right off a college campus. Food is what's cool right now. I think the whole, food justice, there's a real food challenge. They were also at our conference, but there's a lot of really awesome groups mobilizing students and getting people excited. If there is a student movement right now in America, it's around food.
So let's get it to all 4,500 campuses soon, and let's take this from a cusp issue and just hit it out of the park together, because I agree with you.
Come to our next conference,
get it done.
Kick down some chairs.
Let's do it.
All right. Yeah, so questions? Okay. Yes.
For focusing an entire section on this topic. Thanks. My question has to do with the consumer side of food waste and changing people's perceptions about eating food at expiration, leftovers, that whole side of things. Just curious what initiatives you know of out there right now that's focusing on making people more excited about pushing the boundaries of what they're comfortable eating, and just the whole idea of seconds markets for bruised fruit and anything that you think is really changing that whole side of the food waste issue.
Yeah, so that is one side that Food Recovery Network focuses a little bit less on. We're more about institutional change. I know there's a lot of resources out there, like Love Food, Hate Waste is a good one. They're based in the UK. But just raising awareness and creating best practices for what consumers can do. I know that Dana Gunders from the Natural Resources Defense Council is about to release a new book, which is all focused around food waste at the consumer level, and coming up with recipes and stuff like that for what to do with would-be wasted food. But one cool thing that Food Recovery Network has sort of incubated this spring and is rolling out as a separate for-profit social enterprise this summer that we're just kind of trying out, a project called Hungry Harvest, where we take food, tapping into some of the agricultural surplus that Nick is also working with, and trying to create a home for that food. So it's estimated around 6 billion pounds of food goes to waste on farms every year, and a lot of that, like you said, is because there's a small blemish, or it's a funny shape or size, stuff like that, but it's still delicious produce, and it deserves to be eaten. So we're basically selling that produce direct to door to consumers at bargain prices, and so we're trying it out. We sold about 5,000 pounds of produce this spring for $1 a pound to students, and it's one of the first attempts to sort of try to create a market. Also, Doug Roush, who's about Doug Roush, the former president of Trader Joe's, I'm sure a lot of people are heard, is opening up a grocery store in Boston called the Daily Table, which is selling expired food.
I would just add on a very basic level that, so we do food service at colleges and universities. We have tons of guests that come through our doors, and we try to utilize that as an opportunity to educate, not just about waste, about all of our sustainability initiatives. But we do partnerships with students on Clean Your Plate campaigns. We do trayless initiatives in our dining halls. We have waste audits that we'll do. We'll do really exciting displays where we put out the amount of pounds that are wasted, that just really get people to think twice before grabbing, filling up their plate. So on a very basic level, we feel we're in a position to educate folks and get people to think twice before wasting. Another question?
Hi. You guys talked so much about, institutions, restaurants. Now, a big part of what I do for work is I'm a recipe developer. I work on cookbooks, and the amount of food waste that just passes through my own kitchen is astonishing. Mm-hmm. I've started paying for a compost service so I can compost a lot of this stuff, but I'm sometimes cooking up to 10 recipes a day. It's food for 100 people. Do you know of any resources that individuals can use to try to, make a donation, or in some way, like, just not throw it right in the trash?
Yeah, I think the main thing is everyone can compost. And so that's one idea. And there's other, like I mentioned, there's innovations flourishing. There's this guy, Jeremy, called Compost Cab. He started a service, is it New York or DC?
DC.
DC, and he's hoping to scale that. He picks up stuff like that. And
I
even
have
on
a great composting service, but if I understand composting right, I cannot put like meat in my compost. I can't put things that have been cooked in my compost.
There you go.
So what I want to know is, what do I do with all of this cooked food that I'm currently just throwing in the trash?
Post on Crop Monster.
Yeah, no. I think a lot of it has to do with probably, just common sense. Not saying you don't have common sense, but pre-planning.
I try very hard to be responsible with saving stuff and giving stuff away, but
there we go. You still
and
end
I've
up.
had this conversation with a lot of cookbook authors and recipe developers. It's just it's kind of a big, it just makes you feel terrible.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment onto your question, and that is, I run a incubator kitchen in Southwest Detroit, and what we found, there was a stylist who was styling food for commercials and was doing the exact same thing. She was going through and throwing away so much food. Well, guess what? We were able to hook this stylist up with the folks at the church where we use their kitchen. They feed the homeless. So now what we do on Mondays, after her shoot for the weekend, she stores all that food, and then somebody from the church goes to pick that food up, and then we feed the homeless community with that food. And so that's one thing that we're doing. And then we also work with restaurants, chefs, people who create recipes, and some of the stuff that we repurpose it. You're absolutely right. It's great food, and then we give it to folks who don't have anything to eat.
Right. I personally have not been able to connect with that.
Just another idea that just triggered in my head. How we started wasn't with any fancy gear or program. We just made an alert and told our friends that we had this surplus, and pretty soon folks started offering solutions, and now it's gotten to a point where we have restaurants posting, like yesterday, 50 quarts of fennel France, the day before 32 pounds of beef lard and fat. And I think just by putting it out there to your community, using the networks you have, the solutions will emerge, similar to what she's mentioning. We see that a lot. Put it out there.
So I wanted to ask a question, I think this is sort of for you, Nick, about, you're talking about recovery on farms, and I remember a few years ago hearing about the California Food Banks Association doing a lot of really creative work to glean really good food from farmers across the state, and I wrote about it. It's just such a great example of addressing food waste, and I got pushback from people who I really respect who said, but Anna, is this really a good thing for those farmers? Does this make the food less valuable? Is there a way for those farmers should be getting paid for this food that they're growing? And I'm just wondering how you balance as a farmer, these questions, or what you would say to those people who read my, this is a great example of food waste recovery piece and we're critical of it.
Bingo. So, great question. Farmers are starting to get paid. But what we're finding is even with the donation write-offs and the pay, it's still not a lot. So I'm really interested in that question. And what we like to see is more recognition programs through a program like Ben's. And then also when a farmer does something philanthropic like this, we want to broadcast that positive gesture to the community to thousands of people. And we want to market their generosity and their farm, and we want to get them on page 1 of Google without having to pay advertising. and that's what we're working on. So that's definitely close to my heart, that question, and we could talk offline here about other ideas. We're meeting with the California Association with Food Bank this Friday, and I can't wait to dive into those issues. It's our first meeting with them.
And I'll also just briefly add that our model for Hungry Harvest does pay the farmers for the food that we recover as well.
And I'll just add that Bon Appetit, I'm working on a pilot in California where we are working with our farmers to capture that product and pay for that product and utilize it, because we're slicing and dicing and it doesn't have to be pretty. Yeah. So we see the opportunity there. We want to support our farmers, and there is a market for it. Yeah. So.
One more example, First Light Farm out in Sonoma County where we live, Nathan and Jesse, they're working on a bunch of angles here. They had 20,000 pounds of surplus, dry farmed, premium, ultra awesome red potatoes this year that they couldn't find a home for. So we started launching alerts and working with them, and they were able to sell out and make a great return through Rayleigh's, a chain of 100 supermarkets, stepping in and saying, we want to help. But at the same time, they have a lot of surplus. So what they're doing is they're working on gleanings with their organization and getting volunteers out to harvest. So they may not get paid for everything, but they've got a model that adapts to different aspects of their business, and I think it's working for them. And we see that a lot.
All right, I think that's it. So thank you so much.
Just a quick one.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay.
Because we're running behind, if everyone wants to continue this discussion, there's a lot of enthusiasm. We will just have to cut into lunch a little bit. We have an extra long lunch break. So do we want to do a couple more questions? There's some gleaners in the front row who want to speak, and someone else. And then we'll wrap this up in 5 to 10 minutes. How do people feel? You want to continue the discussion? Okay. Let's just do a couple more questions, please.
Can I do a demo real quick? We've been eating the apple all wrong all along, and I recently saw a video where someone was like, you know what, you're not supposed to bite it on the side, you're supposed to eat it from the end, and there's no apples here, but I've tested it out on the sponsor's pears, and you can seriously, eat a pear from end to end, no core, no waste. So I think it's a good metaphor for how we're tackling this issue too. All righty, more questions.
More questions.
Some of the conversation centered on these community exchanges. Mm-hmm. Can you just expand on that a little more? Is that where a restaurateur would bring the extra food, and are they pervasive?
Well, yeah, we started this model 13 months ago, and there's a lot of different great work being done in communities all over the country. If you contact any one of us, we can help you find some resources. But to answer your question about what we're doing, we started so recently that we're only in one region and working to develop and hone our model. We're almost ready to replicate, provided we find bold community leaders around the country who are willing to really partner with us. And then secondly, I think a little more explanation about how it works would be helpful. We have examples just to bring it home for you here. I mentioned the 20,000 pounds of potatoes. Farmers often have surplus, found a home for it after the fact, honored Rayleigh supermarkets for coming in only 3 days' notice with not a lot of bureaucracy and saying, we're going to save the day, we're going to help the farmer. Another one is a gleaning alert. How many of you have heard of gleanings? I know it's been mentioned. We often see gleaners with 3 volunteers trying to go harvest 4 acres of oranges. And so in that situation, what we want to do is post an urgent community alert to let everyone know that there's this amazing opportunity to get outside, join the glean team, and go out and harvest. And oftentimes we can get that 3-person glean team to 30, setting a record the next day and distributing it to 6 organizations. In communities, there are also distributors and others throwing away a lot of food. As she mentioned, I'm a dumpster diver, and aside from going to a comedy club while I'm here, my wife and I have been looking at the trash. There's food all over the place here, despite some of the great work that's happening in New York. We see food service and other businesses post alerts on the food they're throwing away, which takes a lot of guts to admit they have problems, and it's costly. Post an alert, then the next day it's over to a farm for compost and over to another operation for animal or pig feed. Backyard apples posting, just everyday citizens. We see that happening, and more counties are starting to enact laws that allow people to sell and donate from their backyards. And then we've also seen posts like the local church growing food for the food bank. They don't have a tractor. They make an alert, hey, I need to borrow a tractor for 6 hours. And then the Make-A-Wish type foundation thing happens, and someone reads that alert filtering through the community, a foundation, and says they deserve a tractor. They're doing God's work. And we had that situation where someone kicked down 15 grand for a church food bank farm to get their own tractor. So any sort of example can really make it happen. I hope that helps.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I'm Denise Garner. I'm the founder and board chair for Feed Communities, and we're in Arkansas. We're also the publishers. The nonprofit is the publisher of Edible O's Arkansas, and so that is our funding leg of our community nonprofit effort. We have been working. I personally have been working with food recovery for about 30 years. And then our nonprofit has been working with food recovery and gleaning and a lot of other things. We're a nonprofit for hunger relief, nutrition education, and food justice across the supply chain, across the food supply chain. So we've been doing a lot of these things, but one of the things we worked with Ben, what happened was when we started gleaning and when we started food service, we found it, or food rescue, we found out that people didn't know about the Emerson Act, and so we contracted with the law school to work out this pamphlet. So now we do have a pamphlet that we can send out to anyone and everyone who is interested in food recovery that talks about the legal aspects and the liability issues. So we have that. It's on our website. We're willing to share it with anybody who wants it, and that's true with anything that we're doing. One of the things that's happened with gleaning, the first season that we tend to glean, when we glean at the farms, we tend to collaborate with churches or organizations, youth organizations, those kinds of things that actually go out to the farms. What we found out fairly quickly is that you don't have to hold a rally if you go to where the people are. We have the #1 farmers market in Northwest Arkansas. We're a small community, 60,000 people. And so we have the #1 farmers market, according to Farmland Trust, for our community. And so we go to the farmers market, and so we do glean from the farmers market. And I don't see Anna, but what happened was we finally started the first summer we gleaned, or the first season we gleaned over 18,000 pounds. Great news, and then distributed it to the pantries and to the distribution centers, the community meals and that kind of thing. And so what happened was, even after distributing it to all that we knew of, and we've done extensive research with our organization to find out who those people are, and so, and where those programs are. And so what happened was we ended up still with too much produce to hand out. And so we started a value-added kitchen. And so we worked with our university. We worked with the farmers to bring that extra produce and make value-added products. And so the farmers are learning to make applesauce or apple butter or whatever it is out of their apples that they have excess. And then they share that product with us, and we use it as a fundraising and also as giving it away. They've developed programs. We've developed programs from our farmers where we quick freeze the produce along the way, and then we make a vegetarian chili that we use the kind of the Tom's concept to buy one, give one away. And so we're sending good food home with kids in snack packs and summer meals and those kinds of things. And the farmer is getting the training and the knowledge base we're not paying them yet, but we're working on that.
It's awesome. I want to write an impact story.
And then we also have plans for the secondary markets as well, so that we're taking that food into the food deserts and selling it at a reduced price, but the farmer's still getting the money. Because it's not good news for anybody if the farmer's not getting paid for what they do. So, but we have a lot of different programs, and again, we're willing to share any of them. We have an edible equity piece in every issue of Edible, so we talk about, this is only our fourth, we're only getting ready to publish our fourth issue. So, but everyone has had and will have an edible equity piece where we talk about food rescue, or we talk about gleaning, or we talk about farm workers justice, or whatever. So anyway, anything that we can do to help, just holler at me.
And I also just wanted to add that much like the USA Pears representative mentioned yesterday, that she can be your point person on anything related to pears. I, and I'm sure both Nick and Claire, are happy to be a resource for anybody who's interested in writing a story about food waste or food recovery.
Please share Ben's alert too. That would be awesome. Get that one out there.
We'd appreciate that. All right. All right, thanks a lot, guys.
I have one more quick question to Nick, because you spoke a lot about these alerts.
Yeah.
Could you go into more specific detail about how these alerts work and what makes them so effective? Because
Yeah.
I do youth development for a food nutrition non-for-profit, and we struggle getting information to a large number of
Yeah.
youth and students. So can you go talk into more detail about that?
Sure thing, and happy to go grab some coffee with you later too. We feel that in order for this to really be effective, we need to take this beyond a commodity level and make it and wrap every exchange with community awesomeness. So we encourage people to make posts, and a lot of times they'll make one that maybe is a little bit Craig's-listy, because that's what we've been trained to do, right? But we work with them as moderators to tell a story around the background of their operation, a little bit of their struggles. We encourage people to open up their hearts a little bit and say, hey, and this is what we did at our farm. Here's the struggle, people. And then we help them post these alerts on surplus meat or beef bones, or you can go to our site and see hundreds of examples. And if you can trigger that interest in people on social media and on email, even using the good old-fashioned phone tree, you might not be interested in that broccoli or those beef bones, but if it's an interestingly enough community issue to you and we can get you to just share it with your network, that's where the magic happens. It's getting folks to realize that we're here, make alerts. Secondly, it's inspiring that sharing behavior. And then after the fact, showing people that they mattered by publishing stories of documented impact, but also the qualitative side, the stories of meaning and inspiration, those little bits of hope sandwiches, each and every time.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
We'll be around.